everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I just want to start off by saying, in the sake of radical honesty, this is not memorized, and so because I'm so ensconced in what I'm about to tell you, I have cards that I might rely on. So I just ask you to listen to the message and engage with the message. When I first found out that this talk was about access, I was overwhelmed with all of the ideas I had that I wanted to share with you. Access to equity in education. Access to voice specific to women and girls who frequently aren't heard or seen in and outside of school. Access to the hidden curricula, shedding light upon the ways in which our educational system fosters a heteronormative, racist, classist, sexist curricula that denies the majority of our students identities that are who they are. The latter topic led me to this. Today, I want to talk to you about radical honesty and how when we get honest about who we are, where we come from, what traumas we have endured, and what we need to thrive, we are able to provide more expansive space for all of our students. The results are bigger than any passing score on any standardized test. Modeling radical honesty and self-reflexivity promotes self-awareness and agency to our students, which is more important than any common core standard or benchmark required to thrive beyond the confines of school. I am a teacher, educator, and a researcher, among other identities. My research focuses on the schooling experiences of marginalized people, specifically girls, people with disabilities, addicts, and members of the LGBTQIA community. I write about how we must listen to the experiences of these marginalized people in the same way we have listened to, and dare I say, favored the experiences and narratives of those who have been labeled as normal. Those who are straight, white, heterosexual, able-bodied, able-minded, male. I integrate the experiences and narratives of these marginalized people to teach pre- and in-service general and special education teachers how to be effective teachers, role models, and advocates. They enter into my classroom with a sincere sense of urgency, desperate to know how to write an individualized education plan, thirsty to know how to differentiate instruction, curious to know how to adopt classroom management tools that address the student who supposedly has a problem with authority. I meet their sense of urgency with a somewhat dramatic lack of interest to what they think is so desperately urgent. My lack of urgency is not because I don't care, but because I believe, pedagogically speaking, these issues aren't half as important as knowing their students without the labels that have been projected onto them by doctors, parents, teachers, counselors, peers, society at large. It is my utmost belief that in order to know our students, we must first truly know ourselves, or at the very least, be really willing to look at ourselves in a radically honest way. In my classes, students are required to read at least one body of work written by my role model, activist, professor, and writer, Bell Hooks. Hooks writes about the importance of recognizing one's own social location. To talk about our social location is to talk about the privileges, life experiences, and identities we bring to our proverbial classrooms. To ask a group of skeptical strangers to talk about their evolving identities, privileges, and lived experiences that have led them to the path of becoming a teacher is not a small feat. Our social location, as I teach about it, is where we come from culturally, intellectually, geographically, politically, religiously, sexually. They are the identities we have adopted, challenged, and rejected to be who we are and where we are today. Our identities are constantly shifting. This is a reality that's both terrifying and liberating. How we define normal is based upon our social location. Those who claim color blindness, those who claim homosexuality is a sin and should not be discussed in school, those who believe that there are sports and musical instruments for girls and there are sports and musical instruments for boys, and those differ. Those are all beliefs that are based in and informed by our social location. I ask my students, as I will ask you now, to think about your own social location. Who are you in this moment? What privileges or lack of privileges have brought you to where you are right now? How do your personal experiences contribute to your expectations of others and those around you? How does your social location, your race, your ethnicity, your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, and overall worldviews, how do they influence your assumptions about people both located inside and outside your social circles? What most of my students come to realize is that they have learned in binaries: good versus bad, right versus wrong, normal versus abnormal. These binaries have shaped the way they see themselves, and therefore they've shaped the way they see their students. In order to learn about lesson planning, IEP writing, and differentiated instruction, my students must first unlearn this extremely subjective way of thinking. What happens in my classroom is what I can only hope will happen in future classrooms. There is a pause for self-reflection, of reframing identities that have been long informed by narratives built upon racist, classist, homophobic, heterosexist, ableist curricula, and a culture of denial that exists both inside and outside of school. Today, I'd like to share with you some of the voices from the margins. These are snapshots from a much larger body of qualitative research that I've collected over the years, and it highlights the voices of two women as they reflect back on their schooling experiences. My hope is that we can listen and truly hear the firsthand accounts of marginalized students in the hopes that by gaining insight into their past schooling experiences, we have an opportunity to recreate new narratives for ourselves as reflexive leaders, educators, and advocates, as well as for our future self-reflexive agentic students. So Beth says, so in second grade, all of our reading is group reading. I'm a really good reader, and I'm so bored. I'm a really good reader, and I'm so bored. I'm out of my mind with boredom. We have these big books, and I'm always reading ahead. And I'm reading ahead because I'm so bored. And inevitably, the teacher would call on me, and I wouldn't be paying attention. So they thought I was stupid, and I got put in the lowest, like the bottom, even though they knew that I had scored at a fourth grade reading level. But it was like I was bad. I mean, nobody asked, why aren't you paying attention? Because I would have told them, I'm bored and I'm reading ahead. But what was going on for me wasn't part of what mattered there. It was, you're not paying attention. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that's when I started getting put into the stupid groups. And I'm so not stupid. She later says, I think it was in the 8th grade that I got into a history class where the teacher actually wanted us to think. And I did amazingly well because I was interested. It wasn't like, here's the class, here's the assignment, you need to spit it out like this. And he pulled me aside one day and said, you know, you're a leader. You really have leadership ability. And nobody had ever said that to me, but I had always felt that it was true. But I thought, how could that be true? Because I'm always in trouble, and they think I'm stupid and disrespectful. So that was the first time that I felt somebody saw me for who I actually really am, as opposed to who I look like on the surface. So I include these two very different stories from Beth's narrative to offer insight into the subjectivity that we bring into our classrooms as teachers. One experience provided Beth with no support and left her not only feeling stupid, but physically displaced her into a lower level reading group. The other experience provided Beth a space to step into her leadership identity, something she states she always felt, but it wasn't until her teacher reflected back to her that she had the permission to step into that identity. I highlight the tension between these two identities because Beth directly relates her interactions with her teachers as playing a part in how she saw herself. This tension further speaks to my call for radical honesty and self-reflexivity in teacher education. Sharing narratives like this one can and already has created a discourse around the subjective lens through which we communicate with our students. This subjective lens is directly connected to our social location, our belief systems, our biases. Sarah says, "My gender was so strange as a kid. I was wanting to be a boy. I wasn't. I was a girl. And then I was ADD and from a crazy, violent, alcoholic home. I found no advantages of being a girl in school. I didn't have a lot of self-acceptance that I was a girl. Everything was challenging." So 6th grade started and I became really aware of my gender stuff. I wanted to be good. I really wanted to be good. I was afraid for my life. I was really afraid of what was going to happen. I was really, really good at sports, and that felt super safe. I just put all my energy into that. I knew that I wanted to learn stuff, and I didn't want to be bad, and I wanted to be like the other kids, and I wanted to figure out how to be a girl, and it just felt fake in a lot of ways. I just faked it. I've included Sarah's narrative because it's a powerful statement about how one student makes the parallel between conforming to a gender she doesn't relate to and being good. A good student and a good girl. Sarah's story is a reminder that our students, like us, have lives outside of the expectations of school, which provide chaos, disruption, and unsafety. What if Sarah, like Beth, had a teacher who paused and asked, "How are you? What's going on? How can I help?" What I'm advocating is for teachers, teacher education programs, and education at large to consider the schooling reality beyond a one-size-doesn't-fit-all motto. Let's dedicate our careers to modeling what it looks, sounds, and feels like to adopt a self-reflexive pedagogy. That is, identifying what baggage, expectations, and assumptions we bring to our classrooms based on our own social locations. What expectations of good versus bad student did Sarah and Beth share in these snapshots? And, even more importantly, how did their teachers contribute to the positive and negative ways, identities, that they took on, specific to their ability to thrive or not thrive in school? Over the years, as I return to these schooling stories, I think about access and the lack of access these women had specific to their schooling experiences. It isn't that they lacked access to themselves. In fact, as they reflect back, they're very clear about who they are and why they are and what they needed. What they lacked was access to a space in which their voices were honored, their truths valued. These are the memories that we carry with us, physically, emotionally, mentally, about school. What if we, as educators, mentors, and leaders, made a commitment to ourselves to remain teachable and self-reflexive, knowing that when we have access to our voices, our truths, we can provide a space for our students to do the same. Thank you.